Cool. So I think I'm live now. Just let me double check. There we go. So I wanted to do a recap of this week because I started using TechnoTutor at a daycare this week and doing it consistently. And for those of you who aren't aware of what TechnoTutor is, it is an education technology that you should really take a look at. We have a lot of awesome videos that speak about different things um, that would give you a lot of information on it. But also, I would highly encourage you to see it firsthand. And you can always reach out to me later and ask me more specific questions. But I just wanted to talk about what I've been doing with TechnoTutor in uh, this daycare that I've been going to. So first off, I was seeing that, okay, uh, I had an opportunity to work with some kids and just seeing how those kids could learn, starting with their ABCs and going forward from there, and seeing if I could use this um, or the application of using it in a daycare setting, because I know it works really well with children at home, right? And I wanted to see, okay, let's see what happens in a daycare setting. And so I went to this daycare and asked to work with the kids. I've got, credentials to be able to do that. And I've got my fingerprints on file, all of that, right? And I started selecting children one-on-one who are good candidates to be learning their alphabet, right? And these children are about to go into a voluntary pre-K program where they're going to learn their ABCs. And they're supposed to learn their ABCs and their numbers up through 30 by the end of, well, 4 or 5 months, generally how long a voluntary pre-K program lasts, right? So I started working with this one girl who I originally thought was 4 years old. Um, and we start working on some letters. And actually, at first, it took a little while for us to go into, um, how well she was actually focused on um, the using TechnoTutor, using the technology, right? And so we spent a lot of time just talking, and she would just say, "Oh, I'm so silly," and she would point at something going on over there or something going on over here, and she would say, "Oh, I want to go over here and explore this and see what's going on over here." And then she'd come back and she'd say, "Okay, now I want to go over there." And then we'd sit, we'd use the technology for a little bit. We'd use TechnoTutor for a little bit, and then she'd go and she'd start saying something else, right? So we're just learning the letters at first. And within that, she's like, okay, telling me stories about at home or with her parents or, you know, anything that she found interesting in that moment. And I let her. And at the end of that, that was day one. So this is day one. I go in and I start talking to her, and she tells me all this stuff. And then we get through using TechnoTutor, and that took about 15, maybe a little bit longer than that, minutes. And then I go back and take the next child and start working with them. And what I'm doing is I'm going into their class and I'm saying, okay, who is basically going into this voluntary pre-K program, and then selecting those kids one by one, and then bringing them basically out into the hall where there's other teachers but not other students and other distractions like that, and working with them one-on-one to learn, okay, let's learn the alphabet, let's learn the letters, right? And so the first child, it took about 15 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, and she was very distracted, very like interested in everything that was going on around her. And I didn't find this out till later, a couple days later, but I thought she was 4. She's actually only 3. And so she was more interested in just like everything, right? But what was also really cool about that was she seemed unfocused on what we were doing. And then she said even to me like, "Oh, I want to do something else." And I asked her what she wanted to do, and she said, "Well, because we were focusing on just a few specific letters." She said, "I want to do numbers." And I said, "Okay, well, we can do numbers." And so we did the numbers, and then I said, "Why do you want to do something else?" And she said, "Because I know these letters already." And that was after a couple of days, right? But then that very first day, that second child that I brought back, she got it in 5 minutes. 5 minutes, we were using the program, using TechnoTutor, and she was able to, at the end of those 5 minutes, tell me what A, B, and C was, which I thought was really cool. And she was legitimately 4 though. And then I started calling kids that it was their first day within that center, and bringing those kids back. They'd seen the other kids, and they thought, "Oh, okay, well, this must be, what gets done here is this is how you learn, or you spend some time doing this learning." And what I found within those kids, it was super cool. Their expression of what was going on within using the technology, using TechnoTutor, which doesn't have any kind of like cartoons or anything like that. They were so excited and having so much fun in using TechnoTutor. They were like expressing to me literally out of their mouths, "This is so much fun." And we're literally just learning the alphabet. We're literally just learning letters, right? And they were getting it right away, very quickly. And we were having a lot of fun within that. And they're telling me like, "Oh, wow, yes, yes." And I'm asking them, do you like this? And they say, "Yes." And I say, "Okay, cool. We're done for the day. Do you want to do this again tomorrow?" And they're like, "Yes, yes, yes." And then I bring that particular student back to class. And when I do, they go and exclaim to the entire rest of the class, "I learned something," which I just found really cool. It's been a lot of fun just seeing that, how children actually do want to learn. And I'm seeing how simple it can be and how much fun they can have while doing it, right? And so when I brought that child back, everyone else in the classroom also wanted to learn something. And so they were then clamoring and just saying, "Hey, can I go next? Can I go next?" Right? And so everybody who wanted to learn something got a chance in that class. And I just spent a couple hours that day at that center doing that. And I came back the next day around the same time and did it again. And when I came back the next day, I started working with those same kids. And there was also some other kids that I wasn't aware of the first day, that they weren't there the first day. And the same kids, they were excited. They were already asking, "Hey, can it be my turn first?" And I started working with them. And just to give you some more clarity, all the students that I was working with that first day were basically between 4 and 5. And then there was one 7-year-old, right? And then the next day, then there were a couple of 5-year-olds, more 5-year-olds, 6-year-old, and a 9-year-old, right? And I started working with them because they were asking, "Oh, what is everybody else doing? Can I be a part of that?" Right? And in total, I think I worked with 12 students for the week. And we spent about, for each of them, generally speaking, about 5 minutes per child, and then some space in between for them to do other activities like eating lunch and things like that. But what I found really cool with the older students is the older students also wanted to learn something. And what I did with them is I started them on the letters as well. So we started on the letters with the older students. And what I found was even the older students don't exactly recognize the letters um, as confidently as maybe you or I might, right? Where I can distinguish a lowercase b from a lowercase d or a lowercase p from a lowercase q. That was a bit of a challenge for some of these older students. And so we worked on that. We worked on that until they got to the point where they were confident within that as well. And then today, Friday, um, with some of those students, we worked through, okay, all the letters and all the numbers up to 20, right? And we did uppercase and lowercase letters, just making sure that they had those things down. And then we started working on words. And today, with some of the older students, we started working on the words. And I'm talking about 5, 6, 7, and there was a 9-year-old as well, right? We started working on the words, and that was really cool because I could see within the older students who some of them are already in first grade or second grade, right? Um, and so I was asking them if they felt comfortable with words first. And they were telling me, yeah, I know some words. I'm like, okay, cool, let's see. And so we started working on just 10 words at first. And in working on those 10 words, I could see that they actually weren't very confident in how to spell these words or exactly what these words meant. And so one of the words was I, like the letter I, but capital I. And this was mixed in with other words as well. But they were aware that we had already gone through the alphabet and everything. And now we were focused on words. And so it was interesting to see when they were presented with the letter I, they knew it was the letter I, but on the keyboard, so I let them use the keyboard and they love it. But on the keyboard, they would type I, but upon seeing that it was lowercase, they would delete it and then type an L. And so we talked about that, how an I, an uppercase I, looks like a lowercase L when it's typed up, right? And then we talked about, okay, well, what does I mean? And so we went through a lot of these words, and I could see with some of these students, they were getting half of the words wrong. We worked on 10 words, they got 5 wrong, right? And I could see also something that's really cool within using TechnoTutor is it works on, or it utilizes your natural learning ability in order for you to learn things. So it's not like this rote memorization, it's not spaced repetition, it's using your own natural learning ability, taking advantage of that in order for you to actually learn the information. And what's interesting within that is seeing at a certain point, you've taken in too much information. And we've all seen this, when you're in a lecture and then you got so much information coming in, you start to become drowsy and things like that. Well, I could see that within the students that I was working with. I could see, oh, like we're working on these words and we've maybe done a few letters or numbers before that. And now at this point, they're making just weird mistakes where they're not able to focus as attentively as they were just 5 seconds ago. And you can see it very clearly. And what I was seeing within that is, oh, okay, they've reached their limit. And I was able to sit with them and say, okay, hey, here's what's going on. You have reached your limit for today. We're going to take a break for right now, and we'll come back to this another day. And just explaining that to them, they were like, oh, okay. Because I could see also within them making their mistakes, they were starting to get frustrated. And not like frustrated in the way where they're just like, ah, but just like frustrated within themselves, which I think this is another thing that we've all experienced where you're like, I keep messing up. Why do I keep messing up? Right? And I could see that starting to express itself within them. And so at that moment, I just said, okay, let's take a break and we'll come back to this another day. And we did. And after we had practiced those words, then today we came back and I could see within one of the students, one of the girls, she was ready to learn these words and she got it right away as soon as we started. I said, okay, great. After we went through these words, what was really cool was then we started discussing, as I mentioned before, how a couple of the students would replace the I with an L. Well, we started discussing, okay, well, what does I mean? What does this I mean in this context? And we started talking about, well, this is I as in I go to the store. And then we started making up sentences together. We looked at the definitions of these words. And as we were looking through the definitions, it was so inspiring just to see that these kids actually wanted to know what the definitions were. They were actually interested in, oh, well, what is, okay, this word jump. Okay, how can we use that in a sentence? Oh, well, I jumped over this rock. But then also seeing another definition of jump, meaning to change between one thought and another. And seeing the realization on their faces of going, oh, yeah, actually, I didn't think of it that way. And then going through all the words that we had just learned, where it was at this point where I realized that they had learned the word, they knew the word, and it only took us about 5 minutes to do that, right? And I could see the difference from when they didn't know the word 5 minutes prior to when, oh, now they've got it down. And we learned 10 words today, and we did that as well, not yesterday, but the day before, on Wednesday. And I was just doing some quick math and seeing, oh, okay, so technically at the end of kindergarten, you're supposed to know about 1,000 words or so. And I was looking at, okay, at this pace, if we do, let's say, if we even do 5 words, 5 new words a day, that'll definitely put you over 1,000 words. If you're doing 5 words a day for 5 days a week, that definitely puts you over the 1,000 words that you're supposed to have for kindergarten. And so I'm seeing how we can actually implement that in our school or in this daycare that I was working at, right? And also seeing within the younger students, the ones who are still 4 years old, going into the voluntary pre-K program, seeing within them, some of them are progressing very quickly, where they've gotten the first few letters, now they're on to the next few letters. And it's cool to see when they recognize that they actually recognize the letter, they turn to me and they go, oh, that's E. And I'm like, yeah, that's E. And they can distinguish between E and C. And that's really cool too. And then also recognizing, okay, what word that letter might be a part of. That was really cool because that was something that wasn't instigated, but rather at 4 years old, they could see on their own. Like they'd go, oh, D. And they call me DJ, and they go, like DJ? And I'm like, yeah, that's really cool. Another thing that I noticed was, so this particular daycare had been using TechnoTutor in the past, just a little bit actually before I got there. And one thing that they told me was with the teacher that they had working with the students, they weren't very enthusiastic with the students. And so that enthusiasm, or actually lack of enthusiasm rather, because they weren't very interested in what they were doing, the students weren't interested in it either. However, when I showed up and said, well, okay, let me see what's going on and just implement it myself, I'm not doing anything that's like special or anything, or making, voices or anything like that. I'm just literally there present with the kid. And I am actually interested, but I will also allow them time to just kind of space out and talk about whatever it is on their mind that they want to talk about. And I'll actually have a conversation with them. And then I'll just guide them back to, okay, let's finish this up and then we'll keep talking, right? And within that, I could see what they were telling me before was, because the kids weren't interested, they were like, oh, maybe, this isn't for us. But then seeing now, oh, the kids actually are interested. They're just looking for somebody who's also there with them because they actually care. They're actually having a lot of fun with it. So it's really just the ability to sit there and be patient with the child. That's what I noticed within myself, is I'm just very patient. And so I'm okay with, okay, we're going to be here for a little bit. That's fine. They want to talk about whatever they want to talk about. I kind of remember what it was like being a kid and just talking about like what interested me. And then also remembering how other people didn't seem as interested in the things that I wanted to talk about, and how crushing that felt at times, right? So it was cool to do that and see how interested they were just from being patient with them, but also recognizing how much patience it actually takes to work with a child to actually ensure that they understand these things. Because as I was talking about before, when we started working with the older kids, and there were words that they didn't recognize, where they were making kind of silly mistakes, I was just explaining to them, okay, here's what's happening. You are thinking that this word is this way because that's how a different word is spelled, right? And you're trying to attribute that to this word, but even though you know how this word is spelled, your mind keeps wanting to go back to that other way, right? And they're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And we just continued practicing. But the reason I explained that is because then they didn't get frustrated with themselves or the word. Instead, they understood why they were doing that, why they kept making the mistakes, and then they were able to correct that. And then we were able to get through and then actually talk about, okay, what does that word mean? And things like that. I could see that requires also a lot of patience, but it also requires a lot of attention. And so what I'm seeing thus far is that's not actually possible within a classroom setting. Within, like, if you've got 20 kids, it's easier to give instruction to the whole of 20 kids all at once, but you can't catch where that particular child or an individual child is having a challenge and what their specific challenge might be, and then correcting that and actually helping them overcome that in the moment, so that it doesn't become a point later on where they're judging themselves for not getting it or not learning it quickly enough. And so within all of this so far, what I've found is kids actually want to learn. They actually really enjoy it. But the reason why kids have a lot of apprehension at times is because the method that they're being taught in is actually like hard for them, where they're not actually getting it. They're not understanding it. It's not intuitive. It's not fun for them. What we're doing, or what I'm doing right now, is I'm seeing how intuitive learning can be for a child. And when it is intuitive, it's actually a lot of fun for them, and they want to learn. They want to learn more. And it's funny just seeing all the things that I'm doing right now. I would have thought that kids would have hated to learn the alphabet or um, their numbers or anything, because it does take a bit of time to actually learn it. But what I'm seeing is they're actually having so much fun while doing it. And that actually makes it even more fun for myself. Where instead of like, oh, you know, now I have to like force them to do it, which is probably where somebody else might come from, that starting point of, okay, this is going to be hard. This is going to be arduous. I got to force them to do it. Instead, I'm just there, like, okay, let's see how this goes. And then we're able to have fun and actually talk, and I can explain things. And they're very attentive. I can see within them while they're looking at me, they're very attentive and listening and actually wanting to understand what it is that I'm saying, which is super cool. And then I can also see within them just like, oh, not only are they attentive, they actually get what I'm saying. And so, um, yeah, I think that's about it of what I wanted to share today. I'm going to continue doing this and just seeing like what more comes up, because this is actually really exciting. I can see that there's a way that we can teach kids that they actually really enjoy, they actually learn really quickly and rapidly, and they're getting all the knowledge that we're saying that they need by the end of kindergarten or whatever. There's a way that we can do it where they're very supported, as opposed to uh, having a child who's just like dejected or frustrated, or feels like the system isn't really caring about them. This is a way where I'm showing like, oh, just with 5 minutes per child per day, we can do this. So that's really exciting.